Welcome back, Free Rocky Nation. This is vlog 14, part 1, and this is my kitty Jolie, and he would not leave me alone, so he is demanding to be cuddled, so he's going to be part of today's vlog. The name of today's part 1 is Robber Testifies Against Accomplice. So you can still pull up the newspaper archives from my dad's trial. There was a reporter named Bob Wigginton, and he was reporting for the local paper, the Quincy Herald Whig. His first article that he wrote on my dad's trial was written on January 25th, 1994, and I'm going to read that article to you today. The key, again, it was called The Robber Testifies Against Accomplice. Now, that title is an interesting title because Mr. Wigginton is writing as if my dad is the accomplice and Kent Humphrey is the robber, which, as you know, my dad was eventually convicted of being the mastermind, and Kent Humphrey was eventually considered to be his accomplice. The key witness in a trial of the man accused of robbing 2 taverns in 1992 admitted he turned state's evidence to help himself. Kent P. Humphrey, 31 of 1439 Cherry, has pleaded guilty to helping Larry G. Harris, 34 of 821 South 11th, rob Kelly's Tavern, December 8th, and the Silver Dollar Tavern, November 30th, both in 1992. Why did you confess to the armed robbery? Adams County State's Attorney Scott Walden asked Humphrey during Harris's trial that began on Monday. Because I knew the defendant and myself was guilty, and I would help myself before he talked, said Humphrey, who was Harris' best man at a wedding last May. The two also started a small business after the robberies, but the business failed. So you wanted to beat him to the punch? Walden asked. Yes, Humphrey said. Humphrey, who has previous convictions for theft and burglary, testified both robberies were Harris's ideas. He testified Harris, quote, staked out, end quote, both places and believed they could make easy money. He told me he would take care of the people in the bar and I was to get the money. Humphrey testified of the Silver Dollar robbery, which netted about $200. Humphrey testified Harris hit a bar patron over the head with a gun while he took money out of the register. Harris is also charged with hitting a cleaning man in the head when he and Humphrey robbed Kelly's, netting about $2,000. We was pretty happy about what we got from Kelly's, said Humphrey. Humphrey testified his only role during the robberies was to collect money, although he admitted he carried a knife during the Silver Dollar robbery. But under cross-examination by Jonathan Barnard, defense attorney for Larry Harris, Humphrey hesitated frequently and at times responded vaguely. Barnard asked Humphrey who placed a dish towel over the face of the Kelly's cleaning man who was forced at gunpoint to lie on the floor face down. I believe Larry did, Humphrey said. Barnard, in his opening statements to the jury, said Humphrey and other prosecution witnesses were not credible. Barnard grilled Humphrey for about 1 hour Monday about his initial statements to police last September. Quincy detectives interviewed Humphrey in the Pike County Jail in Bowling Green, Missouri, where he was being held on a number of charges, including theft of a truck, possession of cocaine, and misdemeanor assault of a police officer. Reading from a police report, Barnard pointed out Humphrey initially told police he had rented the truck from a fictitious man, a story that led to other lies. At the beginning, I told a lie, Humphrey said, but Humphrey said he tore up his initial statements because they involved several innocent people. He testified he also realized that telling the truth was the only way I would get any break. Humphrey said detectives came to interview him about the 2 armed robberies and told him honesty could help him. The basic equation is that you give them something, you get something in return, Barnard asked Humphrey, who has an extensive criminal past. Humphrey was sentenced to 6 years in prison in 1982 for taking indecent liberties with a child. In exchange for his testimony, Humphrey faces no more than 15 years for the armed robberies, Class X felonies, punishable by mandatory prison sentences of between 6 and 30 years. Humphrey could have been sentenced to 60 years for the offenses. Several Missouri charges were also dismissed, but State's Attorney Walden said those dismissals had nothing to do with the plea agreement. I didn't know if I was going to get a deal or not, Humphrey said. Humphrey also testified Harris said a gang called the Latin Kings would, quote, cut off his head, end quote, if he testified. Harris's brother, now in prison, allegedly belongs to the gang. Harris also wrote Humphrey a letter from the Adams County Jail warning him not to testify. The letter was read in court Monday. You are the only one that can hang yourself. The letter reads, Rod, Harris's son, will not testify either. I have already taken care of that. Remain quiet, and you will walk with me. If you refuse to testify, we are both free, not just me. The trial is expected to last until Wednesday. Harris was convicted of shooting a man in 1984. First of all, my Uncle Gary was in prison. He has since been released and was actually killed in a motor vehicle accident. He was walking along a highway, was struck by a vehicle, and killed. He was never part of the Latin Kings gang. My father was never part of the Latin Kings gang. I don't know if you can tell, we're very white. I don't know much about gangs, especially the Latin Kings. I don't know how they feel about white people joining. But my dad has no gang affiliation inside the prison. I didn't know my Uncle Gary that well, so I can't speak for him. But that was never a thing.